Brooke mocked her mother-in-law's stew, live, on camera. She didn't know Evelyn owned 49% of her brand. The legal notice hit mid-live stream. Sponsors vanished. Mike, her husband, just stared. Too late to stop it. Evelyn stirred quietly, apron on, flame steady. "She married into the kitchen?" Evelyn whispered. "I built it." "Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe." She wrinkled her nose at my stew, and I saw my son laugh. The scent of rosemary and slow-braised beef filled the house, rich and familiar, like the memory of better times. The kind of meal that clung to your sweater and warmed your ribs for hours. Evelyn stirred the pot one last time and wiped her hands on her apron, a faded thing with blue flowers and a frayed hem. She heard laughter from the dining room and smiled, carrying the heavy ceramic dish out like a prized offering. She placed it on the table gently, between Brooke's sculptural charcuterie board and a gleaming copper tray of truffle-whipped deviled eggs. Brooke didn't look up. She said, nose wrinkling. "Is that beef stew?" The laughter stopped. Mike cleared his throat. "It's my mom's old recipe." Brooke blinked, then smiled with a politeness that cut like ice. "Oh, how rustic." Evelyn's hands stayed folded in her lap. Her cheeks flushed, but not from the kitchen heat. There were 13 people at the table. Cousins, neighbors, even Brooke's videographer, accidentally, invited last minute. And not a single one touched the stew. Instead, they complimented the cranberry compote with orange zest and the sage foam mashed potatoes Brooke had reimagined from a Scandinavian blogger. "Oh my God, Brooke, your plating is so clean," said one guest, phone camera hovering above her porcelain plate. Brooke beamed. "Minimalism makes the food the art." Evelyn said nothing. Her stew sat in the center, steaming gently, untouched. But then her granddaughter, 6-year-old Ivy, piped up with innocent cruelty only children could deliver. "Daddy says Grandma makes peasant food." The silence sliced through gravy boats and sparkling cider. Brooke laughed lightly, sipping her white wine. "Kids, right?" Mike gave a sheepish chuckle. "She hears everything." Evelyn looked at her son. He didn't look back. Peasant food. She stirred her cider slowly, trying to remember how many times that same stew had filled their stomachs when the heating was off, and the car had broken down and Mike had been too proud to tell his friends they were struggling. She thought of the day her husband died, and how she'd made the stew that night, just for something warm to hold in her hands. She didn't eat that day either. Later, while everyone gathered around Brooke's phone to watch her newest video tutorial, Evelyn wandered into the hall and opened the narrow linen closet. Behind stacked towels and a plastic tub of holiday lights sat an old cedar box. She hadn't opened it in years. Inside were documents, yellowed, curled at the edges, tax returns, letters from her husband, receipts from the original kitchen renovation, and then she found it. A manila folder labeled in her husband's handwriting. Kitchen, deed clauses plus inheritance notes. Her breath caught. Her fingers trembled, not from age, but from something else entirely. She flipped through the stapled pages, her husband's legal handwriting sharp and purposeful. There, nestled among clauses and footnotes, was a paragraph that began, "In the event of shared residency, the kitchen remains under shared authority, unless the original financial contributor is deemed neglected or displaced. Neglected, displaced." She looked up, toward the laughter echoing down the hall. One of Brooke's followers was complimenting the lighting in the kitchen. Evelyn slowly closed the file. She didn't storm back into the dining room. She didn't raise her voice or demand apologies. She simply straightened her back, tucked the folder under her arm, and walked to her room with the silence of someone who had just remembered exactly who she was. That night, when the house was asleep, Evelyn sat on the edge of her bed with the folder open again, this time reading every word by the dim glow of her bedside lamp. She didn't need the recipe anymore. She needed the clause. And tomorrow, she'd visit someone who knew exactly how to use it. They said I should feel lucky to live there. I remembered paying for the marble counters. The scent of Pinot Grigio and burning soy candles drifted through the house. Evelyn stood in the hallway, a glass of water in her hand, invisible in plain sight. From the kitchen, bursts of laughter echoed. Brooke's voice rose above the rest like a show host mid-monologue. "Here's the vibe I'm going for," she was saying. "Farmhouse chic, but elevated, you know? That gray and gold range has to go. I want a backlit spice wall behind floating shelves." "Oh my God, yes," someone chimed in. "So Pinterest, worthy." Evelyn took a slow sip. The spice wall she was referring to? Evelyn had tiled that wall with her husband, every square inch of it, when Mike and Brooke were too busy chasing startup dreams to help. She walked back into the dim guest room where she now slept, the same room that once held boxes of her things, neatly labeled and out of the way. She reached into her nightstand and pulled out a thin blue folder. Receipts, invoices, wiring transfers. Her name was on every down payment line, the $42,000 that secured the house, another $11,800 for the kitchen renovation, the exact slab of Carrara marble that Brooke now staged olive branches and stone salt bowls on for her Sunday Savor blog. She had called it the perfect clean look in her last post. Evelyn called it hers. A week earlier, at a wine and brie mixer Brooke had hosted for her online followers, Evelyn had stepped into the kitchen just as someone asked, "Who's that?" "Oh, that's just the pantry ghost," Brooke giggled. The guests laughed. Evelyn stood frozen, caught between a refrigerator hum and the taste of humiliation. She didn't correct her. She didn't need to, because the ghost had a paper trail, and now it had a memory. Later that night, Evelyn stood by the mail cubby near the garage entry. A small black folder sat unopened under piles of catalogs and Amazon boxes. She pulled it out, her name half erased in faded Sharpie. Property agreement, green estate home inside. She found the clause her husband had insisted on keeping in place, one she'd forgotten under years of meals and compromise. In the event that the home's original financial contributor resides on site, they retain shared ownership of any functional communal spaces to which they contributed materially or contractually. She blinked. Functional communal spaces, kitchen, living room, pantry. Her breath slowed. The next morning, Brooke stood at the island, filming a short for her TikTok series. "Okay, so I'm thinking we rip out this corner entirely," she told her ring light. "Maybe convert that breakfast nook into more prep space, something softer, brighter, and definitely no more grandma tiles." Evelyn, standing just out of frame with her tea, watched her trace design plans across a notepad that included demolition notes, a demolition that couldn't legally happen without her consent. She took another sip. That evening, Evelyn went back to her blue folder and added a new document, neatly, quietly. Not a recipe this time, a copy of the clause, highlighted, dated, and initialed. As the house quieted and Brooke's laughter faded behind the door to the master suite, Evelyn placed the document on the center of her quilt. She stared at the words for a long moment, her finger resting on the phrase, "co-ownership of all communal spaces." Her eyes didn't blink. Her apron hung on the closet door, undisturbed. Tomorrow, she'd start with a phone call to someone who knew what those counters were really worth. And this time, she wouldn't be cooking. She'd be reclaiming. "They moved my spices to the garage and told me it was just temporary." Evelyn opened the cabinet and froze. Where the familiar rows of glass jars used to stand, paprika, cumin, cardamom, her mother's dried bay leaves from the old country, there was nothing but minimalist white tins with gold labels. Sea salt, smoked paprika, umami dust. The air no longer smelled like food. It smelled sterile. Vanilla bean candles and surface spray. She stepped back slowly, turned toward the pantry. Gone. The basket of cloves, the heirloom pestle and mortar, her favorite chipped tin labeled Brown Sugar 1973. All gone. "Brooke?" Evelyn called gently from the kitchen doorway. Brooke didn't turn. She was setting up a brand new overhead ring light above the island, mouth twisted in concentration. The kitchen looked like a film set. "Just organizing," Brooke replied absently. "Don't worry. I moved your spices to the garage shelves. Temporarily." "The garage?" Evelyn repeated. Brooke finally looked at her. "Yeah, It's too cluttered in here. I'm trying to curate a look. You understand, right? It's for the channel." She didn't wait for a response. Later that afternoon, Evelyn tiptoed out to the garage, stepping over cords and stacked Amazon boxes. On a dusty shelf next to the snowblower and a half-used can of bug spray sat a cardboard box. She opened it. Her spice jars clinked weakly against one another, some lids cracked, one bottle leaking cinnamon dust onto a coil of extension cord. Her fingers trembled as she reached in, brushing cinnamon from a label that read, "Mama's Turmeric." She closed the box without a word and carried it back to her room. The next morning she woke early, needing something warm to make the silence go down easier. She reached under her bed where she kept her old handwritten recipe cards in a lockbox. She flipped through them by memory until her fingers landed on one, Gingered Apple Clafouties, Mama's Holiday Special. The scent of it rose in her mind instantly. Baked apples, browned butter, the gentle hum of the oven when her mother hummed old lullabies in the kitchen. She went to the trash can to toss a scrap of paper and saw it. The same recipe, torn down the middle, crumpled beside a half-used coffee pod. By the time Mike came home, Evelyn had said nothing. He was in the living room, tie loose, scrolling through sports scores on his phone. "Mike," she said softly. He looked up. Did you see my things were moved out of the kitchen?" Mike exhaled, not looking up from his screen. "It's not a big deal, Mom. Brooke's just doing her thing. Let her." "My things are in the garage," she said. He shrugged. "She's got a system now. Aesthetic matters for the brand." "Aesthetic?" Evelyn repeated, tasting the word like vinegar. He didn't reply. That night, Evelyn sat at her desk, recipe cards laid out like fallen soldiers across the surface. She opened her bottom drawer and pulled out a folded business card from 2 decades ago, Joseph Alden, attorney at law probate. Inheritance. Property consulting. He had been her husband's friend once, the man who handled their will, the one who drafted the clause they thought they'd never need. She stared at the number a moment longer, then picked up the phone. "Joseph," she said when the line picked up. A pause. Then a warm but cautious voice answered. "Evelyn?" I haven't heard that voice in years. "I found the clause," she said, "the kitchen one." Another pause. Then carefully, "Then it's time we talk about how much power a pantry really holds. They thought I just made stew. I used to audit food corporations." The sound of sautéing garlic sizzled in the background of Brooke's latest recording. Evelyn sat just out of frame at the edge of the hallway, unseen and uncredited, the smell of scorched olive oil crawling down the walls like smoke. "She's got good hands," Evelyn heard the videographer say, "but the voice needs more polish, less mom blog, more executive kitchen." Brooke laughed on cue. Behind her smile, Evelyn could see it, the illusion of professionalism. But that kitchen, that marble counter, the stove Brooke angled her videos around, they were built on a binder, one she hadn't opened in a decade, but she remembered where she kept it. Later that afternoon, Evelyn stood on a step stool in the garage, balancing her weight between storage bins and old folded tarps. She reached high, feeling around behind dusty cake pans and a decades-old fondue pot. Her fingers touched leather. She pulled it down. A thick, charcoal black binder, heavy as a cast-iron pan and twice as damning. Inside, account ledgers, tax records, kitchen vendor contracts from her auditing days. Before she was Grandma Evelyn, she had been Evelyn Green, CPA, Certified Culinary Auditor. She hadn't just stirred stew, she'd audited multi-million-dollar food service chains. She once flagged a $200,000 misuse of supplier funds on a fine dining account that folded 6 months later. She turned the page and found what she was looking for, the invoice she wrote for Mike and Brooke's first home loan contribution, not a gift, but a recorded startup agreement. A second copy of the kitchen clause, notarized, receipts for each item Brooke now branded as her aesthetic. She placed the binder on her kitchen table, Brooke's marble now glowing under overhead lights, and ran her hand over it like a weapon forged quietly in the dark. 2 days later, she walked into Joseph Alden's office with the binder wrapped in a floral tote bag. He didn't speak right away. He didn't need to. He just opened the binder, page by page, nodding slowly. "This," he said, holding up the clause, "is ironclad. If Brooke has monetized anything in this kitchen for commercial use without your consent, that's a violation of this shared property clause. She live streams recipes from this island," Evelyn said calmly. "Sells e-books, shot a brand campaign next to my kettle." Joseph raised an eyebrow. "She used to write handcrafted by me. Now it's just Brooke's Kitchen." He leaned back in his chair, tapping the edge of the binder with one thick finger. "You want to file a cease and desist?" "I want her to know," Evelyn said, "that the next time she posts a recipe she didn't earn, it'll cost her more than likes." Joseph smiled. "Consider it done." That night, Evelyn sat with her tea while Brooke laughed with her subscribers from the kitchen. "Next week," she told the camera, "I'll show you how to elevate your holiday table without old-school casseroles." Evelyn didn't flinch. She just opened her email and hit send. The cease and desist, official, quiet, legal, like her. The next morning, while Brooke watered her succulents and filmed a Q&A, her laptop pinged. A digital alert blinked in bold red. "Notice from County Registrar, kitchen ownership dispute pending." Her voice caught mid-sentence. "What is—" The screen darkened. Brooke leaned closer. In the silence that followed, Evelyn opened the window to let in the breeze and smiled as the scent of her tea leaves curled into the air like steam from a pot that hadn't boiled in years. She was live streaming when the email alert ruined her smile. The kitchen glowed under ring lights and diffused sunlight bouncing off white countertops. Brooke adjusted her apron, flawless makeup layered over irritation from a sleepless night. "Okay, besties," she chirped to the camera. "Today we're tackling the coziest fall dish, maple sage butternut soup. But don't worry, it's nothing like that. Old stuff." A smirk followed the jab. Off camera, Evelyn cracked eggs into a ceramic bowl. Her hands moved slowly, rhythmically, measured like a metronome. The scent of vanilla and cinnamon began to rise into the space Brooke pretended she owned. "I like to toast my sage before adding it," Brooke went on. "It really elevates the flavor." Ping. Her tablet blinked. Then again. Her screen split. The stream continued, but her eyes darted to the pop-up. Subject, urgent. Cease and desist. Use of registered kitchen space from County Registrar's Office. CC, Joseph Alden, Esq. Brooke paused mid-sentence. The silence lingered too long. "Is everything okay?" a subscriber commented. She forced a laugh. "Tech glitch, sorry guys." But the message opened itself again on the second monitor. A second email followed before she could blink. Subject, brand sponsorship withdrawal, Saverware Company. "Per recent legal developments regarding your use of disputed kitchen space, our team is terminating our promotional relationship effective immediately." Brooke's face drained of color. Behind her, Evelyn slid a tray of muffins into the oven. Mike walked in from the side hallway, still in his office hoodie. "What's happening?" he mouthed. Brooke didn't answer. Her hands trembled slightly as she fumbled the camera settings. The stream's chat turned suspicious. "What's going on? Did something happen? Wait, is this about that legal kitchen tweet?" She reached for her phone. Another notification. Saverware's public apology post. But the tag? "We regret the misunderstanding and have reached out directly to Ms. Evelyn Green to make amends." Mike read over her shoulder. "What do they mean, Evelyn?" Brooke turned toward the hallway. Evelyn was placing a clean towel over her cooling rack, a faint smile creasing her lips like freshly folded parchment. "Did you—" Mike began, then stopped. "Wait, Mom, did you go to a lawyer?" She didn't look at him. "Muffins are almost ready. Would you like cranberry or chocolate chip?" The next morning, Brooke stormed into the dining room holding a thick white envelope. "You're trying to ruin me." Evelyn, already seated with coffee and a neatly sliced grapefruit, glanced up. "Good morning. You froze my live revenue, cut my affiliate links, and now brands are pulling out." "I asked them to reconsider," Evelyn said calmly. "They did." "You've gone behind our backs and I've gone through legal channels," Evelyn corrected gently. Mike dropped into the chair beside Brooke, confused and exhausted. "Mom, why didn't you just talk to us?" Evelyn folded her napkin. Do either of you remember 2 years ago, when Brooke wanted to launch her blog full-time, the kitchen remodel, the equipment, the lights? You said you just needed a little seed money. Brooke narrowed her eyes. It was a gift. No. Evelyn reached beside her chair and pulled out a worn red folder. She slid a copy of a document across the table. 49% shareholder agreement, she said. Signed, notarized, filed. I kept the original just in case you forgot. The paper sat there like a silent bomb. Mike's mouth opened and closed, the air leaving the room. Brooke looked as if she'd been slapped with a spatula. You're part owner? She choked. Of my brand? Evelyn took a long sip of her coffee. Correction, she said softly. Almost half owner, and I've requested an emergency freeze of the business accounts until this legal mess is resolved. That evening, as Brooke furiously typed at her laptop, another email arrived. She opened it. Breath held. Subject: Notice of account freeze. Green & Company Holdings. Per filing 12B Culinary 349, your accounts have been placed in a holding pattern pending court evaluation. Brooke stared, horror blooming across her face. In the hallway, Evelyn quietly wiped her hands on a dish towel, the scent of warm muffins still in the air. Her smile returned, not wide, just certain, like someone who had just flipped the burner off at the source. They unfollowed her in real life, too. At first, Brooke thought it was a glitch. The follower count on her dashboard, which had proudly read 312,843 the day before, was now at 305,190. She refreshed the page. It dropped again. 304,876. She clicked open her analytics panel. Comments on her last few videos had shifted tone. Once filled with glowing emojis and #KitchenQueen, the feed now bloomed with quiet skepticism. Wait, didn't this recipe appear in a 90s cookbook? Is this your grandma's dish? The kitchen doesn't even look like hers anymore. Brooke stared at the screen, heart thumping. Downstairs, the scent of spiced apple and brown sugar wafted from the oven. Evelyn, in her soft gray cardigan, pulled out a tray of muffins and placed them on the cooling rack, with the ease of a woman who'd done this long before Instagram ever existed. As she wiped flour from the counter, she glanced at her tablet. The browser was still open to an old recipe forum she hadn't visited in years, the Bakewell board. Someone had uploaded a photo of her molasses ginger snaps. Remember Evelyn Green's spiced cookies? I've been looking for this taste forever. Found her name in the corner of a faded recipe card. Still the best thing I've ever made. Dozens of comments followed. She taught me in high school home ec. A legend. My mom has her pecan pie recipe laminated. Evelyn smiled, a little sad and a little surprised. Like someone remembered an old song you thought only you knew. That afternoon there was a knock at the door. A familiar voice. It's Marian. I brought something. Evelyn opened it to find her next-door neighbor holding a still warm cherry crumble pie, wrapped in a faded red kitchen towel. I made this using that recipe you gave me years ago, Marian said, smiling. Wanted you to know I still use it, and I saw that mess online. People are starting to figure things out. She squeezed Evelyn's hand. Behind them, Brooke passed by the window, her face a stone mask as she watched Marian step inside. Later that night, Mike cornered his mother in the den. This has to stop. Evelyn didn't look up from the recipe notebook she was updating. What has to stop? You know what I mean, he snapped. Brooke's numbers are tanking, sponsors are dropping, you're ruining her livelihood. I'm enforcing legal agreements, Evelyn said calmly. On property I co-own, using recipes I created, in a kitchen I funded. Mike rubbed his temples. This isn't just business, it's family. She finally looked at him. Family wouldn't treat me like furniture they forgot to move. His silence was answer enough. Later, alone in her room, Evelyn sat at her desk organizing recipes when she decided, on instinct, to check Brooke's blog. She clicked on the newest upload, Cozy Kitchen Classics, Nostalgic Fall Favorites. The first card displayed a familiar recipe, sweet potato bisque with clove cream. The photo was Brooke's. The branding was sleek, but the handwriting on the scanned recipe card? Evelyn's. Her looping, slanted cursive, unmistakable. Another card. Apricot-crusted chicken with lemon rosemary glaze. She'd written that for her anniversary dinner in 1982. She clicked again, heart tightening. A third. Pear and nutmeg bread pudding. Passed down from generations. Evelyn leaned back, hand slowly forming into a fist. She stared at the forged cards, her past paraded in digital ink, stripped of her name. She clicked download on each file. Then she picked up her phone and called Joseph Alden. "Joseph," she said, steady as a blade, "we have a new problem. She's not just stealing the kitchen now." A pause. "She's forging my handwriting. She posted my soup. I posted her copyright notice." The email went out at 8:03 a.m., sharp. Subject line: unauthorized reproduction of protected recipes. Formal notice of infringement. Evelyn read it twice before hitting send. Then once more, just to savor it. The document was meticulous, drafted by Joseph Alden with surgical precision. It listed each stolen recipe, the forged cards Brooke had uploaded, and cross-referenced Evelyn's original handwritten notes, some of which were safely archived in a copyright office since 2002. The digital paper trail was undeniable. Brooke had posted not only Evelyn's food, but Evelyn's life. And now Evelyn had posted back, with the force of law. Upstairs, Brooke scrolled through her inbox, expecting affiliate payments. Instead, she saw the subject line blinking like a detonator. When she clicked it open, her hands started to shake. "What the hell is this?" she shouted. Evelyn, in the sunlit kitchen below, stirred a pot of slow-cooked chicken soup. The smell of thyme and roasted garlic drifted up the stairs like a memory Brooke never owned. By noon, it was trending. A popular food blogger had quietly reposted screenshots. Brooke's recipe cards, side by side with archived scans of Evelyn's handwritten originals, uploaded by an anonymous user on a culinary watchdog forum. Hashtags emerged by the hour. Kitchen theft. Recipe, justice. Stew, with a side of lawsuit. And then, the magazine. Evelyn nearly dropped her spoon when she opened the email. Subject: Feature Opportunity, Food and Hearth Magazine. We'd love to feature your story in our upcoming Heritage Recipes and Legacy Women issue. We've followed recent developments online and would be honored to tell your side. Evelyn leaned against the counter, her heart beat slow but proud. Someone finally wanted her version of the truth. She wiped her hands on a linen towel and opened the little green notebook she hadn't touched in a decade. On the first page, Mama's winter broth, for bad weather and broken hearts. She began to write. Brooke stormed into the kitchen mid-afternoon. "You ruined my blog? You think this is justice?" Evelyn didn't flinch. "Did you enjoy the soup? It was Mama's." Brooke's lip trembled. "No one cares about your stew stories." "They cared enough to send me a publishing offer," Evelyn said calmly, placing a signed contract on the table. "Advance included." Brooke's hand twitched. She looked at the pot of simmering soup, then at the file folder. Her voice rose into a scream. "You senile, irrelevant woman!" She grabbed the mixing bowl beside her and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the pantry door, metal ringing out like a broken bell. Mike rushed in seconds later. "What's going on?" "She's pushing me out of my own life," Brooke sobbed. "She's playing the victim." Mike looked at his mother. Evelyn, cool as ice, dipped her ladle into the pot and gently poured soup into a bowl. The room filled with the scent of ginger, lemongrass, and slow-roasted memory. Hours later, the kitchen was quiet. The air still held tension, but Evelyn moved through it like someone who had learned how to breathe in storms. She sat at the kitchen table with her open notebook, transcribing one of the oldest recipes from memory, her grandmother's cornbread. She underlined the sentence, "Serve with silence and warm butter." That's when Mike appeared, standing just beyond the light's reach. "Mom," he said. His voice was quiet, not cruel, but not kind either. "Can you please stop? You've made your point. Can't you just let it go now?" Evelyn looked up, pen still in hand. A long pause passed between them. Then she tilted her head ever so slightly, eyes twinkling. "Stop what, dear?" Mike stood there, watching as his mother returned to her notebook, the scratch of her pen louder than anything he could say. Outside, a delivery van pulled into the driveway. The label on the box, Green Legacy Press, Advance Galley, Heirloom and Hearth by Evelyn Green. A cookbook, a reckoning, and dessert was still to come. They thought my assets were frozen. I was just defrosting the truth. The frost wasn't in the air. It was in the silence that followed every bounced transaction. Evelyn sat at her favorite spot by the kitchen window, tea steeping beside her, as her laptop screen confirmed what she already knew. The transfer to her private trust had cleared. Quietly, legally, irreversibly, her portion of the household funds, those tied to her gifted inheritance, home equity contributions, and a conveniently forgotten emergency savings account, was now locked in a fireproof vault of paperwork, protected by clauses that even Brooke's influencer PR team wouldn't dare challenge. Upstairs, Brooke was screaming into her phone. "I don't understand. It was there last week. Over $8,000. Her voice cracked through the air vents like a fork scraping bone china. Evelyn could hear every word. "No, I didn't make a withdrawal. My mother-in-law must have done something. This is her house, too." Click. Another call. Another voicemail. Another hollow excuse to a sponsor now reconsidering their long-term partnership. Evelyn took a small sip of her tea. Lemon balm. Steadying. She turned her attention back to the table where a spiral-bound contract sat waiting. Her second meeting with a literary agent was in 45 minutes. She gently flipped to the section labeled Advance Payment Terms. The next day, a courier dropped a manila envelope on the porch. Brooke snatched it before it hit the mat. Inside, notice of payment default, mortgage instability triggered by insufficient co-signer funds. Brooke's face blanched. Mike's did too. You moved the money?" Mike asked Evelyn, voice stiff as cardboard. "I protected my money," Evelyn said evenly. "There's a difference." Brooke's nostrils flared. "You're destroying our financial future." "No," Evelyn replied, standing now, placing a fresh pie in the window like it was 1956 again. "I'm protecting mine." By midweek, Evelyn was on a Zoom call with her literary agent, a young, enthusiastic woman named Clara, who had a voice like a radio host and a mind like a vault. "Your story is gold," Clara said. "We'll blend recipes with personal vignettes. Think, salt with survival, butter with backbone. Your memoir isn't just about food, it's about reclamation." Evelyn smiled. "I've got more than stories in the pantry." Behind her, the scent of baked apples filled the room. She liked Clara already. That night, Evelyn found another envelope. This one wasn't left by a courier, it had been slipped under her bedroom door. No stamp, no seal. Inside was a printed eviction notice, request for voluntary departure, shared household conflict, mediation clause, typed out and unsigned, but no mistaking Brooke's formatting. It reeked of Canva templates and desperation. Evelyn held it up to the lamp, letting the thin paper glow like a warning flare. She folded it once, then twice, slipped it into a file labeled Failed Tactics, and smiled. The next morning, Joseph Alden forwarded her an email. Subject line, Attempted termination of co-owner residency, urgent. Attached, a legal copy of Brooke's filing attempt to formally remove Evelyn from her own home. Joseph's message was short. "She's trying to push you out, Evelyn." But she forgot. Co-owners don't get evicted. They evict. I was just a guest, until I turned the deed over. The courthouse smelled faintly of stale coffee and over-polished wood, a sterile blend of bureaucracy and battle scars. Evelyn walked in wearing her navy blue coat, the same one she wore to her husband's memorial, her spine straighter than it had been in years. In one hand, she held a leather portfolio. In the other, a steady calm that refused to break. Brooke was already seated, legs crossed, jaw clenched, tapping a pen against a yellow legal pad she hadn't written a single word on. Her lawyer, a smug, thin-lipped man in a checkered tie, whispered something in her ear. Brooke rolled her eyes but nodded. Mike sat one row behind them, hunched forward, sleeves wrinkled and eyes hollowed. If guilt had a posture, it looked like his. "Docket 314B, Green versus Green," the clerk called. Evelyn's name echoed through the courtroom like a match striking dry bark. She stood, calm. Her attorney, Joseph Alden, stood with her. As they approached the bench, Brooke shot a side glance that could have frozen mercury. Evelyn didn't meet it. She had no more energy to waste on cold wars fought over kitchen tiles. "Ms. Green," the judge began, "I understand there's been an attempted eviction against you, filed by the cohabiting party, Ms. Brooke Green. Is that correct?" Evelyn nodded once. "Yes, Your Honor, though I believe the filing is invalid under shared ownership statutes." Joseph slid a thick binder across the bench. "Exhibits A through K," he said. "Ownership deeds, joint equity breakdown, mortgage contributions, and business investment receipts. You'll find our client is not just a resident, she's co-owner of the property, including the kitchen, under a clause specified in the property transfer, dated March 18, 2016. The judge flipped through the documents, brows furrowed. Brooke's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, if I may, Ms. Green has not contributed financially in recent years and has occupied space well beyond the agreed-upon arrangement." "Objection," Joseph cut in sharply. "The funds used for the initial down payment, renovation costs, and startup capital for Ms. Brooke's culinary business originated from Evelyn Green's trust account. We have certified banking records." The judge raised a hand. "Counselor, I'll review the filings." He turned back to Evelyn. "Are you claiming legal interest in the home?" "No, Your Honor," she said softly. "I'm confirming it." Silence. Even the tap of Brooke's pen stopped. The judge set the binder down and leaned forward. "I see no grounds for the eviction of a legal co-owner. A temporary stay is issued immediately, pending formal review. Until then, Ms. Evelyn Green retains full rights to remain on property." Evelyn exhaled, but not visibly. Brooke stood up suddenly. "She's manipulating the system. This is my brand, my home. She's nothing but a bitter old—" The judge slammed the gavel once. "Ms. Green, control yourself or you'll be in contempt." Brooke froze, lips twitching, eyes burning. Mike leaned forward and hissed under his breath. "Why are you doing this, Mom?" Evelyn turned slowly to face him. "I baked you your first birthday cake on that oven," she said. "Now you pretend I never stood in front of it." Mike's mouth opened, closed again. The moment felt heavier than the courtroom's wooden beams. As they exited, Joseph whispered, "You did good. We hold firm. We've got the next hearing scheduled in 2 weeks. Until then, no one moves you. Not even with a crane." Evelyn nodded. She turned toward the courthouse doors, only to see a figure already waiting in the hallway. A woman in a pearl-button blazer, red lipstick drawn like a blade, heels too sharp for sympathy. Brooke's mother. "Oh, look at you," the woman drawled, eyes scanning Evelyn like she was rust on silverware. "Still clinging to a kitchen that doesn't even match your era." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "And you must be here to stir the pot?" "I'm here to end the drama, sweetheart," she replied, "before it taints the family name." Joseph stepped between them gently. Evelyn didn't flinch. She looked the woman up and down, calm, crisp, calculated. Then, with the same quiet confidence she used to beat bread dough, Evelyn said, "Good. Let's end it properly." The knock at Evelyn's door wasn't impatient. It was entitled, the kind of knock that assumes authority, not requests entry. When she opened it, the smell of perfume stronger than civility hit her first. "Evelyn," said the woman in a silk scarf and patent heels, "I'm here to talk some sense into you." It was Brooke's mother, Gail Weston. Perfect teeth, perfected tone, and perfectly unaware that she'd just walked into the lion's den with gasoline in her handbag. Evelyn motioned to the foyer. "You can speak, I'll listen, but don't confuse silence for submission." Gail's heels clicked on the hardwood as she stepped inside, eyes scanning the space like a realtor inspecting lost value. "This home used to have charm," she muttered. "Now it smells like history books and cinnamon." Evelyn shut the door gently behind her, sliding her phone silently into her apron pocket. One touch. Recording started. "I take it you're not here for a recipe," she said. Gail turned, eyes sharp. "No, "I'm here because my daughter's life is falling apart, and everyone says you're to blame." Evelyn folded her arms. "Your daughter built a brand on stolen legacy. She mocked the hands that fed her, then tried to serve it on camera." Gail's voice rose like steam from a boiling kettle. "Old women like you forget their time is over. You cling to things you used to matter in. Kitchens, family traditions, respect. But none of that pays bills anymore. Brooke is building something modern. And you're sabotaging her." Evelyn smiled softly. "No, I'm correcting the recipe." Gail scoffed. "You're bitter, irrelevant, and frankly, this is why old people shouldn't hold power." Click. That was the moment. Evelyn's finger brushed the side of her apron. Recording saved. "Thank you, Gail," she said, voice like velvet with a razor edge. "That'll be helpful." "For what?" "My lawyer will let you know." Later that day, Evelyn sat across from Joseph in his office, the blinds drawn, 2 mugs of lukewarm tea between them. "She said it?" he asked. "Clear as broth," Evelyn replied, playing back the audio. Joseph listened, then leaned back slowly in his chair. "This isn't just verbal abuse. It's actionable defamation and age-based discrimination. We'll file to have it attached to the harassment pattern." "She didn't know I used to audit internal compliance cases for food chains," Evelyn said. "I've got receipts older than her Botox." Joseph grinned. "You're a walking liability. To them." Meanwhile, back at the house, Brooke's fuse was burning low. Her sponsorships had dried up like forgotten basil. Her view counts were dropping. And her mother's attempted intervention had only stirred public speculation when paparazzi caught her storming out of the courthouse with smeared lipstick and an unzipped purse. But the true explosion came 3 days later. Joseph called Evelyn. "Check your email." She opened it, a forwarded cease and desist from a food publisher's legal team, to Brooke. Subject line, "Unauthorized recipe usage, copyright violation." Attached, side-by-side comparisons of Evelyn's handwritten recipe scans, dated and notarized, and Brooke's originals featured in her recently self-published cookbook. Evelyn stared at the screen for a moment, then whispered, "She actually printed them." Joseph's voice was grave. "It's major. That cookbook is in circulation. She violated multiple copyright and trademark boundaries. You own those recipes, Evelyn, legally and morally. And now publicly," she murmured. By Thursday, Evelyn was sitting in the sunlit office of Harper and Lane Literary. An agent named Clara, sharp-eyed and soft-voiced, passed her a folder. "Here's the formal offer. A memoir, your story, recipes, recovery, revenge even if you want it tasteful." Evelyn flipped through the pages. Her hand trembled just slightly, not from age but from the weight of finally being seen. At the last page, she paused, picked up the pen, signed. Back home, she slid the signed contract into her binder, tucking it behind the estate clause. She looked up as her oven dinged, fresh cornbread done. And just as she plated it with a sprig of rosemary, Brooke's scream echoed from the upstairs bedroom. Evelyn didn't flinch, because her memoir had just been titled, "Stolen Heat, Recipes They Took, Power I Kept." The cookbook looked beautiful, thick, matte cover, gold-trimmed pages, and Brooke's smug face printed beside a quote that wasn't hers. Evelyn stared at the copy in front of her, flipping past the index until she found it. Page 47. "Nana's Depression Stew, Passed Down for Generations." Her thumb hovered just above the page as her lips parted. That wasn't her Nana. That was her. The morning light spilled across Evelyn's dining table, soft and warm, but she felt cold inside. Her agent had just called. Again. "Another 1,000 pre-orders," Clara chirped. "And Modern Kitchen Digest wants to do a feature. The title's getting attention. Stolen Heat is hitting nerves." Evelyn traced the edge of her own manuscript pages, recipes inked in her cursive, everyone rooted in memory, marinated in resilience. She had spent weeks refining each one, reliving stories while making them digestible for strangers, and while Brooke filmed apologies in dim lighting, Evelyn had done what she always did best: let her work speak. A knock came at the door. She opened it to find Mike standing like a statue on the front porch, face slack, eyes red. "I saw the news," he said hoarsely. Evelyn didn't speak. She didn't tell me she published them. I thought they were just drafts. "I swear, you thought wrong." Her tone was even. Not cruel, just settled, like cold tea that no longer begged for sugar. "I didn't know it had gotten this far." "It always had," she said, turning away from the door. "You just refused to see it." He stepped inside without asking. "She's spiraling. The sponsors left. The lawyer bills are killing us. And now this book deal." "This memoir," Evelyn corrected. "Not a stunt, not a scheme. My truth, my legacy." Mike lowered himself into a chair like it hurt to move. "I didn't mean for this to happen." "You never mean anything," she said gently, setting a mug of tea in front of him. "That's your problem." His shoulders shook, but the tears weren't for her. Evelyn stood, picked up her printed contract from the side table, and placed it in front of him. His eyes scanned the publisher's name, the royalty clause, the rights retention. "Every page protected," she said. "Unlike yours," she didn't add. That afternoon, Evelyn walked into the downtown bookstore with Clara and her assistant in tow. A small crowd had already gathered for the pre-launch teaser. On the screen behind her, a slide read, "Stolen Heat, Recipes They Took, Power I Kept," by Evelyn M. Carter. She read aloud a passage about resilience, about butter made from pennies, about how survival sometimes tasted like stew, stale bread, and cinnamon. The applause was gentle, respectful, real. Clara leaned in. "You're trending on Twitter." Evelyn blinked. "What's Twitter?" Clara laughed. But across town, the laughter died. Brooke flinched when she opened her front door to a courier dressed in navy. "Brooke Callahan?" he asked. She hesitated. "Yes?" He handed her a crisp envelope with gold trim and a seal that meant business. It was from the state attorney's office. "Charges? Fraudulent misrepresentation, intellectual property theft, monetized impersonation of authors' recipes." Brooke's hands shook, her knees bent. But the paper didn't tear. Her brand had crumbled, but now the law had arrived. Back at home, Evelyn folded her apron and slid it neatly beside her now-published memoir. The oven beeped, a batch of spiced bread cooling. As she plated the slices, her doorbell rang again. This time she opened it with a smile. It wasn't Mike. It was a news anchor. "Ms. Carter, do you have a moment for a few questions? America wants to meet the grandma who cooked her way into court and came out with the crown." Evelyn stepped aside, voice calm and sweet. "Just don't forget to take off your shoes. My kitchen's clean now." Brooke sat alone in the same kitchen where she once tossed Evelyn's handwritten recipes into the trash. Now the silence was unbearable. Even the hum of the fridge felt like judgment. The ring light in the corner stood unplugged, cold, forgotten. Her inbox pinged with another sponsorship withdrawal. Subject line, breach of copyright, immediate termination. Her empire had vanished like steam from a ruined stew. 3 blocks away, Evelyn sliced zucchini under warm fluorescent lights at the community center's kitchen. 8 women, all in second-hand aprons, stood in a semicircle around her. Some young, some older. All of them listening with rapt attention as she explained the secret to tender dumplings. "Let it sit," Evelyn said, dusting flour across her palms. "Some things taste better when you give them time. Same with healing." A young mom with streaks of flour across her cheek raised her hand. "Can food really fix people?" Evelyn smiled, kneading softly. "It can remind them who they are." The community class had started small, just 2 women and a borrowed crock-pot. But word spread. A journalist from the Herald Courier had attended last week, expecting a quaint hobby story. Instead, she'd written a headline that sparked citywide admiration. "Grandma who sued her way back into the kitchen now teaches others to own theirs." Evelyn didn't care about virality. She cared about legacy. She passed around bowls of broth, the same broth once mocked at her Thanksgiving table. Now, hands trembled when holding it, not from cold, from warmth they hadn't tasted in years. Brooke tried to recreate one of Evelyn's stews in a YouTube comeback video. No sponsors, no stylist, no camera crew, Just her, in bad lighting, fumbling over cumin measurements she never learned to respect. She read hate comments between takes. Liar! This isn't your recipe. Where's Evelyn? She deleted the video before it finished uploading. At the grocery store, Evelyn ran into Judith, an old neighbor and friend. I saw your article, Judith said, reaching for a bunch of parsley. You always had that quiet strength. People finally see it now. They see what I let them see, Evelyn replied with a half smile. She picked up 2 bundles of carrots, one for her fridge, one for the center's pantry. Judith leaned closer. Funny thing, Brooke's mother is now telling people you stole her daughter's recipes. Evelyn chuckled softly. Let her. I don't need to win the argument. I already have the copyright. At home, a letter waited in the mailbox. Heavy envelope, glossy paper. She opened it carefully, eyes scanning the heading, The Morning Rise Show, National Broadcast Invitation. Dear Ms. Evelyn Carter, we are deeply inspired by your story and legacy. We'd be honored to feature you as a guest chef on our upcoming series, Real Women, Real Recipes. She paused at the final line. P.S. The host grew up eating stew like yours and cried reading your memoir. The next morning, Evelyn stirred oatmeal while the sunlight brushed against the counters. Mike hadn't called. Brooke hadn't dared. But the house smelled of cinnamon and slow triumph. At the community center, Evelyn stood by a bulletin board hanging newly framed press clippings. Her students clapped. Just as she turned to begin the next lesson, her phone buzzed. An email preview flashed across the screen. From The Morning Rise Show, final confirmation required for live national appearance. Evelyn tapped reply, then looked up at the women waiting for her. She said softly, Hope you all like cameras. Then she picked up her ladle and got to work. Brooke stood at the kitchen threshold, one hand on the marble counter she used to flaunt on Instagram, the other trembling around an envelope she didn't have the courage to open. But it didn't matter anymore, because the keypad on the kitchen door now blinked red. Access denied? The oven she built her career around had just been legally repossessed by the woman whose stew she once mocked. 2 weeks earlier, Evelyn sat at her lawyer's office flipping through an old leather-bound binder that still smelled of cedar and garlic powder. Page 47. Her late husband's spidery cursive danced across a notarized line, Legacy Culinary Clause. All revenue-generating activity originating in the home kitchen shall remain under the legal domain of Evelyn Carter, regardless of physical occupancy, until otherwise amended by the original holder. Her fingers trembled, not with fear, with clarity. Let's execute it, she whispered. Her lawyer smiled. With pleasure. The clause had been buried deep in the original deed, back when the house was a quiet fixer-upper and her husband still wore pancake batter on his collar every Sunday morning. He'd added it as a joke, half serious, when she joked about owning the soul of the kitchen. Turns out he'd meant it, and now that clause had claws. One by one, Evelyn began pulling the threads that stitched Brooke's brand together. The kitchen? No longer Brooke's to use commercially. The brand assets? Legally frozen under Evelyn's co-ownership rights. The cookbook royalties? Redirected to Evelyn until the copyright claim was settled. Brooke's face, once plastered across jars of rustic aioli and artisan marinade, disappeared from shelves almost overnight. Mike came home one night reeking of stress and bitterness. "You're destroying her," he snapped, tossing his keys on the floor. "She's destroying herself," Evelyn replied, not even looking up from the handwritten recipe she was revising. "You think you're helping anyone?" Evelyn folded the paper, smoothed the edges, and said gently, "I didn't do this for revenge. I did it for what comes next." That next step arrived wrapped in a plain manila envelope. Inside, a signed deed transfer, co-signed by the court, awarding Evelyn full equity ownership of the kitchen's commercial rights. She didn't throw a party. She didn't announce it online. Instead, she called the culinary program director at Rise and Whisk, a nonprofit that trained women recovering from abuse or homelessness in professional cooking. "I'd like to donate a kitchen," Evelyn said simply. "Pardon?" the woman replied, stunned. "Not just donate. I want it to be theirs. The tools, the counters, The cameras, everything Brooke used to keep them out, I want them to use to build themselves up. Weeks later, Brooke received the final blow. The kitchen, her stage, her throne, her entire brand, had been renamed. A brass plaque hung on the tiled backsplash just beneath the spice rack Evelyn had restored. The Evelyn Carter Culinary Suite, in honor of resilience, wisdom, and recipes that heal. Brooke's social media post that day was a desperate one, a single-word caption beneath a photo of an empty mixing bowl. Erased. The comments were merciless. You did this to yourself. Evelyn's recipes fed generations, yours fed your ego. Justice tastes like stew. Mike quietly deactivated his accounts the next day. That Friday, the Rise and Whisk students entered the kitchen for the first time. Evelyn was there, waiting, not to teach, just to hand them each a monogrammed apron stitched with the word begin. They wept. She simply nodded and turned to leave. Outside, a banner hung across the community center. Grand opening, Evelyn Carter Culinary Suite. A young woman tapped Evelyn on the shoulder. Is it true? She asked. You lost everything before this? Evelyn smiled, eyes reflecting the stainless steel glow of a kitchen reborn. No, dear, she replied. I just hadn't cooked the last course yet. The spoon hovered over the simmering pot, just long enough for steam to fog her glasses. Evelyn didn't flinch. For the first time in years, she wasn't cooking to be judged, branded, or stolen from. She was simply cooking, to be heard by the ones who'd never tried to silence her. The dining room was modest but warm. Ivory candles flickered gently along the reclaimed wood table, illuminating the faces of women who had fought through more than bad recipes, women Evelyn now called family. A former shelter resident named Camila passed around a dish of rosemary bread. Smells like my grandmother's kitchen, she whispered. I hope she was better with yeast than I ever was. Evelyn smiled, folding her napkin. Laughter trickled around the table like broth finding its way through vegetables. It wasn't loud, it wasn't performative, it was enough. To Evelyn's right, her literary agent, Trina, raised a glass. To Evelyn Carter, who reminded us that legacy is stirred, not served. The women echoed the toast, clinking mismatched glasses with gentle reverence. There were no ring lights, no plated perfection. Just bowls of stew, still bubbling slightly, as if they carried memory in their heat. Outside, wind rustled the magnolia leaves that framed Evelyn's small back porch. Inside, comfort wrapped the room in spice and serenity, notes of paprika, garlic, bay leaf, and quiet redemption. A younger woman at the end of the table dabbed her eyes. I never knew food could feel like safety. Evelyn didn't reply. She just reached over, gently squeezed her hand, and passed her another roll. The stew that sat in the center of the table was the same one Brooke once called peasant food. Now it was sacred. No labels, no followers, just flavor that lived because it had once saved her. Halfway through dessert, lemon chess pie with a flaky crust Evelyn had nearly forgotten how to perfect, a soft knock sounded at the door. It wasn't hesitant, but it wasn't entitled either. Evelyn set down her fork, walked calmly to the entrance, and found a small brown envelope on the doormat. No signature. Just her name, scribbled in a hand she could still recognize in the dark. Mom. She brought it inside but didn't open it. The room quieted as she returned to her chair. Trina leaned in. You okay? Evelyn nodded slowly. He still thinks I need to hear him say sorry. Someone at the table chuckled awkwardly, unsure whether it was meant to be a joke. It wasn't. The silence that followed wasn't tense. It was sturdy, like a foundation finally free of rot. Evelyn broke it with a soft laugh. I used to think closure needed words, but sometimes peace just shows up with good stew and the right people. Then, without ceremony, she slid her knife beneath the envelope's flap and opened it. One sheet, handwritten. 4 words. You were always right. She read it once. Then folded it back, tucked it beneath her napkin, and turned back to the table. I hope you all saved room, she said, rising. The real dessert's in the freezer. Camilla grinned. Please tell me it's your cinnamon crumble. I never said I was going easy on your taste buds, Evelyn smirked. As the women laughed and rose to clear dishes, Evelyn moved to the kitchen counter, where a small, brass-framed photograph stood beside a vase of fresh mint. It was a picture of her late husband, arms flour-dusted, holding a wooden spoon like a sword. Beneath it, a recipe card in his handwriting. She reached for it but paused. A new voice, warm, unfamiliar, called from behind. "Miss Evelyn, you've got a call, from the cooking show." Evelyn turned slowly, smile blooming with the same softness as her first loaf of homemade bread. The pot shimmered with heat, slow bubbles rising like applause from the bottom of the Dutch oven. Evelyn didn't rush the stir. She never had. Not when she was a wife, not when she was a mother, and certainly not now when her story simmered beneath national headlines. They had tried to extinguish her, but Evelyn had always cooked with coals, the kind that burned long after the fire faded. She stood at her kitchen window as early sunlight laced across the counters, dancing over worn tiles she never replaced. Each one held memory, some bruised, some blessed, but all hers. The apron tied around her waist wasn't spotless, but it was proud, a faint stain of turmeric across the hem. A corner smudged with flour, a stitched name above the pocket, Evelyn Carter. It wasn't a costume for a camera, it was armor. The TV hummed in the background, muted. On screen, a slick morning anchor smiled behind a studio desk as the lower third graphic scrolled, the grandma who took her kitchen back. Evelyn watched her own image flicker, gracefully stern, ladling stew into a ceramic bowl, surrounded by laughter and steam. It didn't feel like vanity, it felt like restoration. From mocked matriarch to movement maker. On the table sat a manila envelope stamped with a logo she recognized, the Hearth Channel. Her hand hovered over it as her phone buzzed with texts she hadn't opened and offers she hadn't read. She didn't need to. She had already said yes. The invitation had come last week. A guest segment turned standing segment. Weekly, national, no filters, no fluff. Just Evelyn and her stew. Live. Brooke hadn't been mentioned once in the pitch. Mike's apology remained unread in her nightstand drawer, but neither haunted her anymore. Outside, the breeze stirred through her herb garden, basil, thyme, mint, and drifted through the open screen. The smell of bay leaves, onion, and slow-roasted tomatoes filled the air like a memory she no longer had to fight for. A knock sounded on the back door. Camilla peeked her head in, holding a clipboard and smiling nervously. "You ready, Miss Evelyn? They're setting up in the van." Evelyn wiped her hands on her apron and nodded. "If I'm not, too late now?" Camilla lingered. "Your hair looks good. You don't need to change a thing." "I'm not changing," Evelyn said. "I've done enough of that for one life." The makeshift set was just her kitchen, with better lighting. No ring lights, just wide beams of natural sun, a handheld mic, and a camera operator with a nose ring who asked for the stew recipe before even hitting record. Evelyn stirred slowly as the countdown began. 3, 2, 1. "Welcome back to Rooted Kitchen," the host announced off camera. "Today, we're joined again by the woman who turned legacy into liberation, Evelyn Carter." Applause. The kind that came without pity, without patronization. Evelyn looked into the lens and smiled, not like someone seeking attention, but like someone finally being seen. "I was told this was peasant food once," she began, voice steady. "But my mother cooked it to feed 7 mouths with 1 paycheck. My husband stirred it when his hands couldn't hold a hammer anymore. And I made it through grief, through gaslighting, and through Google theft." Soft laughter. "Today I make it for you." The camera zoomed in on the stew, thick and golden, rich with marrow and meaning. The studio producer leaned over to the host and whispered, This is going to break records." As the segment ended and Evelyn ladled the final bowl with steady hands, the camera lingered a moment longer. The apron fluttered slightly from a kitchen fan, and Evelyn, shoulders back, spoon resting like a scepter, looked up into the light. "They called it peasant food," she said with a quiet, proud smile. "Now it feeds an empire."